I want to show you something. An old hat. This old hat has some very special meaning to me because it was my grandfather's hat. It is it is not worth much anymore as far as being able to wear. It's fallen apart. Used to have a very nice lining inside of it, and the hat band itself has fallen off of it because the threads have worn. But this hat belonged to my grandfather, and this band that I'm holding here tells a lot about the hat. It's a Mallory 10. It says the Mallory 10, made by the Mallory Company. The Mallory Company, the Mallory Hat Company, was probably the biggest hat maker in our country. In fact, in the late 1800s, the Mallory Hat Company was the second largest manufacturing company in our country. My grandfather purchased this hat, and it's also labeled on here, at C.C. Bradley, Portland's leading hatter, Portland, Oregon. My grandfather was involved in real estate in Portland, Oregon. And he purchased this hat, I'm not sure when, but the Stetson Company purchased the Mallory Company in 1946. And I'm sure that my grandfather bought this much earlier than that, maybe in the 30s. I don't know for sure when. But it has his initials stamped on the band, John Samuel Brown, JSB. But you know what else is on this band that makes it special for me? My grandfather's DNA. If you were to take a sample of DNA off of this band and compare it to my DNA, it would be a match. That's just kind of special for me to be able to hold this hat band and know that it has my grandfather's DNA on it. DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Okay, let's all say it together. Oh, never mind. Deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA. Well, there is an analogy I'd like to make to that, because there's a type of DNA, you might say, with us spiritually. Jesus was having a conversation with the religious leaders one time. You see, they were out to get him. And they accused Jesus of being of the devil. And they said, God is our Father. In John chapter 8, beginning at verse 42, Jesus said to them, if God were your Father, you would love me, for I came from God and I am here. I came not on my own accord, but he sent me. Why do you not understand that, what I say? It is because you cannot bear to hear my word. You are of your father, the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of lies. But because I tell the truth, you do not believe me. Which one of you convicts me of sin? If I tell the truth, why do you not believe me? Whoever is of God hears the words of God. The reason why you do not hear them is that you are not of God. Those were some pretty condemning words. You see, this DNA that we have that is part of our physical makeup, there's another kind of DNA which I would call devil's nature accusing. Devil's nature accusing, because that's what he does. He is a liar. He is constantly feeding us with lies. If you are plagued by thoughts of perhaps of things in the past, of failures, and you are constantly plagued with negative thoughts, that is the devil's DNA. That is the devil's nature accusing you. And the wonderful thing is that one day that will be taken care of. In Revelation chapter 12:10, it says, "And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now the salvation of the power and kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God." That's what the devil does. That is his nature, the DNA, the devil's nature accuser, to constantly lie to you and make you believe you are something that you are not. But thank God that's not the end of the story. There's another nature I want to talk to you about, and that's the nature of God himself. And I call that GNA, God's nature abiding. In John's Gospel, chapter 1, beginning at verse 9, it says, "The true light, which is Jesus, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him." We just read about that. "But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God." Born of God. God's nature abiding within. And because of that, because we have been adopted into God's family, we have God's nature abiding within us, we have a very special relationship with him. Galatians 4:6 says, "And because you are sons and daughters, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father." What does that term, Abba, mean? Abba is, in our modern way of saying that, it would be daddy. It's that personal. It's God's nature abiding within us. Just like that DNA of my grandfather is abiding within me, God's nature is abiding within us. Again, in Romans chapter 8, beginning at verse 15, it says, "You did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear." In other words, you didn't receive a spirit that you have to listen to constant accusing. No, you have received the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself bears witness within our spirit that we are children of God. He abides within us. And it says, "And if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ." You know, the last thing I want to say about that is, Jesus promised in John chapter 14 that he would come, that he and the Father and the Spirit would come, and they would make their home with us. They would abide in us. That's God's nature abiding within us, and that is the best nature of all. We have physical DNA, we have the devil's DNA that we have to cope with, but God's nature is victorious over it all. Fill your life with his abiding presence. Let your thoughts go to him. Let your thoughts be filled with the goodness and the glorious, wonderful privilege that we have of being called a son or a daughter of God. God's nature within. GNA.